Everybody, hi, my name is Aim Amrit Charanpan, calling in from Bangkok, here to support the Dublin Tech Summit. As a major space nerd myself, who, like everybody else, who reads and plays every video game about space, now building communities for tech companies, and as an investor, trying to look for my first space investment, I've jumped on this incredible opportunity to be here to moderate and welcome everybody from around the world to this live Q&A with NASA's Chief Technologist, Dr. Douglas Terrier, straight from his keynote. And everybody, be sure to send in your questions, and we'll be picking up a few select number of them and putting forward to him here live. And don't forget to use the hashtag DTS21 and get the conversation going online. So let's invite Dr. Terrier to the live stream. And as always, thank you so much, Dr. Terrier, for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Amrit. It's great to be with you at the Dublin Tech Summit, one of my favorite venues, and I'm glad to be back and great to be talking to you again.
Exactly. So while everybody will recognize the incredible background, he's been stuck at home in COVID for the past year and a half, but we will make this lively and unique, none like you've seen in the other webinars and YouTube clips. So, Dr. Terrier, straight to my first question. Other than the Artemis program, what missions are currently underway at NASA?
Yeah, so NASA, we are of course excited about Artemis, our return to the moon and getting humans out into the solar system for a sustainable stay. But that's just one of the many exciting missions we have going on. And in fact, this is probably the most, I would say, one of the most exciting times, and certainly in space exploration that we've ever experienced, because we have so many things going on so many different fronts. Just to give you an example, we have, of course, the commercialization of low Earth orbit with the commercial flights now providing transportation of both astronauts and also of cargo to the International Space Station, which has now had crew working for over 20 years continuously, living off this planet. And we're now commercializing that arena. In the meantime, as we extend human presence with the Artemis mission, we're also very excited about our Mars exploration program. Of course, we have the Perseverance rover that landed recently, with the Ingenuity helicopter, the first flight of an autonomous flying vehicle on another planet. And we're learning more and more about Mars and the possibility of maybe previous life sustaining conditions on that planet. We have several other things coming up, looking in other missions, looking at other icy moons and other potential areas that we're interested in seeing potential habitation or potential opportunities to search for life. Meanwhile, we've got the James Webb Space Telescope going to launch later this year, which will give us 100 times more resolution and definition and be able to see right back almost to the beginning of time. So a couple orders of magnitude further than even the Hubble telescope, which has done such remarkable science for decades. And then, of course, we've got, for the first time, two experimental aircraft, the X-59 Quest and the X-57 Maxwell, looking at supersonic flight and distributed electric propulsion. And then I'll also mention, of course, a renewed emphasis on our Earth system observatories. We're going to launch a whole series of spacecraft to further explore our planet. So it's just, it's going across the board with both government, our international partners, and the private sector. We've just got an amazing burst of activity in space exploration.
I can't be more excited. I see you brimming with it. As somebody who's lived, not so long on this planet, it's never been this hectic and fun and all these projects that you read about all the time. And the attendees are sending in their questions right now. I'm super excited. Our first attendee is John Noon. John is from Dublin City University, Dublin, a researcher affiliated with the Artemis Program, Enterprise Ireland, and the European Space Agency. And John's question is, due to the impact of prolonged microgravity that it has on the body, how do you expect individuals to spend a large period of time in microgravity environments without it being detrimental to their health? And has there been novel countermeasures being advanced in order to maintain astronaut health while in these environments? I've seen a few that's already, on many documentaries and whatnot, but is there something cutting edge that's about to come live?
Well, that's a really great question. And as I mentioned before, we've had now 20 years of experience of people living for very long periods. The International Space Station provides us with that sort of orbiting laboratory where we can actually test out not just the effects and understand the effects of long-term spaceflight on humans, but as John alluded to, we have been over the last 20 years, we've been able to develop countermeasures to deal with many of these problems. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One of the first things we saw with long duration spaceflight was in the microgravity environment. We saw, people suffering from muscular atrophy, bone loss, just because of not getting any exercise, not being under any load, their bones not loaded because of not being in a gravity environment. So we've been able to develop now very sophisticated exercise resistive machines and so on that allow the crews to exercise on a daily basis and keep their health up. In fact, we have people coming back is in as good condition now as when they left. People stay for up to a year on the International Space Station and do quite well and adjust quite well because of those countermeasures. So we've got that part of it. There are other issues like ocular degeneration. There's fluid readjustments in your body and so on, and we've had to work with those. There are nutritional deficiencies. Of course, we're limited in food and the consumables we have on the International Space Station. So we've actually developed countermeasures for that, including, for example, dietary supplements. One thing I think is what people would be surprised to learn is one of the supplements we developed to help astronauts to maintain health on orbit is now found in 90% of all the infant formula in the United States because it's been so effective in promoting eye and brain development and so on. So we see these developments on what we are having to encounter in a very, very challenging environment in space, having immediate application to similar problems here on Earth.
So it must be really hard to not be a gym rat if you're wanting to be an astronaut.
Yeah, I think most of those guys, most of the guys and women that go into space are probably kind of a little bit of fitness nuts anyway, and then that prepares them. Of course, it can be quite a demanding job as well when we talk about doing extravehicular activities, spacewalks outside. They're actually quite physically demanding. So though most of the time when you're inside the vehicle and floating in the weightlessness of space, it seems to be kind of almost like a carnival type atmosphere, fun environment, and it is. But there are other tasks that astronauts perform that are quite physically demanding. So fitness is really, really important. And of course, as we go to other planets where we, if we think of the moon where the gravity is 1/6 of Earth, or Mars where the gravity is 1/3, and people will have traveled for up to 9 months to get to Mars in a space environment. So they really need to get there, healthy and fit and ready to work. So this is a critical part of our training, both before, during missions, to keep the physical fitness and psychological fitness of our crew up and ready to go.
Awesome. And I think that leads me to the next question, which is from a very special person. Folks were telling me a national hero, Adam King from Cork, Ireland. 6-year-old Adam, who has OI, which is also known as brittle bone disease. Apparently stole the hearts of the nation in Ireland in December 2020 on the Late Late Toy Show with a virtual hug. And he has a dream of becoming an astronaut and heading into space one day. So Dr. Terrier, very important question for all the community. Adam's question to you is, are you developing any technology to support sending people with wheelchair that needs wheelchair access, or people with OI, brittle bone disease, and for other folks that have different conditions into space?
Yeah, Adam, my first of all, congratulations. You've just become a national hero and touched all of us with your stories. Excellent. And it's a great question. So as I mentioned, one of the things that actually related to Adam's condition, I mentioned that we have astronauts experiencing very early onset of what sort of looks like osteoporosis and has some similar potential side effects or potential problems. So we've been working very hard on mitigation technologies that may in fact have application, particularly to people with elderly people or people with other bone diseases specifically. So we're working with our medical partners to share that information and learn from each other, because as I said, the microgravity environment actually imposes that condition on people who maybe, as you said, astronauts that are typically very fit individuals, but that environment can easily degrade your bone structure and so on. So we work very hard on that specific problem. Moreover, to answer your question about the opportunities for flying in space. So good on you for having that ambition. I am a pilot myself and crazy about anything to do with flight. The great news is we just recently had direction from the White House to revise our astronaut selection criteria and our requirements to enable us to take advantage of the skills of people who may have some physical disabilities. And we're doing a study right now to understand how we can modify our processes and accommodate people with various disabilities. So our hope is in the near future that we will be able to accommodate astronauts with various physical disabilities. I should add that our partners in the European Space Agencies have recently also made that their policy. So both of us are working together, and our international partners generally to look at ways that we can take advantage of the bright people who we could very much use in the program and accommodate some of the physical challenges that they have.
Awesome. So Adam, hang in there. The brightest folks at NASA working hard to figure out this problem, and I'm sure one day you're going to get a chance to be in space. And Dr. Terrier, it's amazing to see that diversity and inclusion, not just the first woman and the person of color on the moon, but people with physical disabilities now having the opportunity to partake in space exploration. So great job for the NASA team.
Well, thank you. And
Awesome.
we certainly have, one of my jobs as the Chief Technologist is also to be the champion for our innovation culture, which I know is something that's very near and dear to your heart, Amrit. So it's very important to us to make sure we have access to, as I said, the brightest minds, the most diverse group of people that we can bring, because we've got such amazing opportunity, but frankly, some really, really tremendous technical challenges ahead of us as we look at these audacious missions. And we want to make sure we've got as diverse perspectives, that people can bring different ideas from different backgrounds, different ways of approaching problems, makes us that much stronger.
Amazing. So I think that leads into my next question from Sivan Human from Cape Town, South Africa, and an environmental tech enthusiast who saw that in your keynote you discussed a lot about technologies being developed for long-term sustainable life on the moon and Mars. Could some of these technologies be used on Earth in our current efforts for a more sustainable planet, especially given the day and age and climate change and whatnot? And what are some of those technologies that you're most excited about?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. Again, that's one of the things that I am, and NASA is very focused on. Many people, of course, are aware of our space exploration efforts for science and exploration and technology. What many people don't know is that it's also part of NASA's charter to ensure that investment returns value to us on Earth and has application to both economic and quality of life throughout the Earth. So space is obviously the most challenging, austere environment you could ask, to have humans survive and live in an environment where you literally have to live off the commodities you have on hand. So when we go to the moon, for example, going back for sustainable stay, one of the things that we're going to do very differently. In Apollo, decades ago, they basically carried with them all the food and oxygen and all the consumables they needed for survival and it was only a stay of a couple of days. We intend to live and work in that environment as we have on the International Space Station. And what we've learned to do on the International Space Station is to basically what we would call recycle on Earth, reuse. We don't replenish the atmosphere. We can't afford to replenish all the water. So we recycle literally water, for example. We've learned how to recycle, obviously, wash water, wastewater, literally human waste, literally perspiration. We extract from the atmosphere and recycle everything. to reuse as drinking water and consumable. So we've learned how to do that and to sort of exist in a closed environment. Similarly, we want to learn how to do that with food. We've just grown the first foods on the International Space Station a couple of years ago, we started that project. And as we look to go to the moon, we're going to be living and working off the environment. So we've discovered large quantities of water in the southern hemisphere in the craters. That's one of the reasons we want to go to that region, because we can take that water, obviously, to use it for drinking water. It's water ice, but we'll have to process it to use for drinking water, and also we can split that into oxygen and hydrogen for breathing, for using for rocket fuel. We'll also be using the lunar regolith, the soils, the materials we find there, as building materials to build. So the whole idea is to learn how to live off your environment and recycle and reuse and be as responsible in that environment. Now, obviously, the technologies we designed for that in space are the most extreme example of austere and responsible environmental conservation, right? And they have immediate access. I'll just give you one quick example, or a couple of quick examples. We have learned, for example, I mentioned growing crops in space. We learned how to use special kind of fertilizers that we work with the private sector to develop. Those have been adapted now for use in terrestrial applications, where it's a kind of encapsulated fertilizer, so it doesn't, we can first of all apply it in a way. It doesn't have the runoff and the pollution that you have from normal fertilizers that end up in the rivers and so on. Second example would be that I mentioned water and recycling. We're able to license that technology to be used in many developing countries, where, as you're well aware, clean water is still a difficult challenge for many people, and in fact, the leading cause of death in young people in some developing parts of the world. And so we've been able to license technology that enables them to utilize NASA space technology to provide clean drinking water. And then the third, I think it's probably most exciting, is we of course have to generate energy in a clean and we probably have the most advanced solar power generation system on the International Space Station. It's completely self-sufficient, generating its own clean energy. And we work very hard at advancing that technology, as we'll need more for surface operations on the planet. And so again, those are certainly one of the greatest needs we have on Earth, is that clean carbon neutral energy. And I think we'll have opportunities to contribute to that in a great way.
Well, if only everybody on Earth lived like an astronaut and conserved everything, I think we'll have none of this climate change problems, and don't take the blue planet, our home, for granted. Now, on that same note, just be well aware that the Thai, our space agency, is trying to send durians into space. So I hope you enjoy some durians as we try to grow them in the moon colony.
Excellent. I look forward to it. Yes.
Awesome. All right, we've got more questions.
I was just going to say, it's funny that you mentioned that. We've found that one of the most important things to the psychological well-being of our crew is just to have food, and a variety of food. So, for example, we with our Russian and Japanese cosmonauts and astronauts, and we share of course each group has their own particular food supply, but they tend to share and meals together, and it's just as on Earth, it's just a way of sharing social interaction, and it helps with raising everybody's spirits. So yeah, we'll welcome some more diversity in the foods.
Yes, I mean, nothing like a bit of taste of home. And
yeah.
Awesome. So I've got a next question coming in from Jack Carney from Dublin, Ireland. Jack asks, why did you want to work for NASA? That's question number one. And do you have another favorite planet or planets in the solar system or beyond that you want NASA to explore?
Yeah, thank you, Jack. That's so I'll tell you a quick story. I may not be the typical NASA employee. I was actually born in Jamaica, in the island of Jamaica, in a time when it was. And my dad worked in a mining operation, a bauxite mine in the interior of the country, where it was very, very, speaking of austere, very much underdeveloped. Most people didn't have running water, electricity, anything like that. So went to a very small school, kind of one-room schoolhouse. And I had an amazing teacher, Mrs. Simpson. We didn't have television, but she read to us when I was 8 years old in 1969. She read the Reuters feed in the local newspaper of the communication between Apollo and Houston. And she read it every day. And that just ignited in all of us in that classroom, and me in particular, that just ignited my passion that, if that was possible, anything was possible. And I have been on this path ever since, and just couldn't be more pleased with having the opportunity to be a part of this. So it's been quite a journey, and it's been a lot of fun. As far as my favorite, I think one of the things that we're learning as we discover more about this solar system, particularly with our robotic explorers, is we're learning that what we thought were the criteria, very narrow criteria for the potential for life, would limit us to very few locations. And what we're learning is that there are other areas that we didn't expect. For example, the icy moons around Jupiter and Saturn. We've now seen evidence that there is liquid water oceans underneath the ice caps, and even some very tentative evidence there may be organic compounds in some of that material. So those are kind of my favorite, those destinations we didn't expect, that we are now have the technology to go, and we've got some missions planned for the in the next decades to go and explore beneath the surface of those planets and see what we find in the oceans there.
I guess we're getting the clues for the next mission, but it's very exciting. I also was inspired, like most folks. I don't want to say Star Wars, but that was this one video game called Alpha Centauri that made such an impact in my life. The question obviously is, if we went there and the technology, and we discovered that it's actually not inhabitable or hospitable to life, it would be the ultimate disappointment to have traveled hundreds of years and then go there like, oh, we went to the wrong destination.
Well, it's interesting that, of course, in the Milky Way galaxy alone, right, there's 100 billion stars. And we now know, we didn't know this even when I was growing up. We didn't know for a fact that these stars had planets. We certainly didn't know they had Earth-like planets. With our Kepler missions and other missions now, we've been able to confirm thousands of proven Earth-like planets around other stars in our own Milky Way, let alone, Alpha Centauri may be one of the targets. Who knows, right? So what's really interesting is that we've found, whereas we haven't, been able to conclusively say anything about finding life, but the conditions for life, we're finding are much more common than we may have thought. And so it's really an exciting time, for the first time in human history, that we're able to definitively, some of these things we've been speculating about, are there places with water and oceans and the kind of conditions we'd expect to see life? We now know for a fact that there are. And with our next generation of observatories in space, we're going to be able to examine the details of the atmospheres. That is with spectroscopy and look at the spectral content of the light coming through the atmosphere of those planets, and we will be able to have very good indication if there is life, because we know there's certain gases that would be produced by biological life. So we're getting very close. And either way, actually, whether either result, it would be profound, the most profound discovery in human history. The result of found life, or the result of Earth is the only life. Either one would be the most profound discovery in human history.
I'm looking to place my bet on Alpha Centauri, but we'll see. Awesome. So Donna McGuire just sent in a question asking, what are the steps for NASA, especially when we're talking about going to other planets with potential life form? How are we trying to take steps to avoid contaminating the pristine environment that we're going to visit in space? Or, are we going to end up contaminating them anyway? So, why not?
No, that's a great question. And many people may be surprised. We recently put out an ad for a position for the Planetary Protection Officer, which is a position at NASA, very, very important position. And of course, people have speculated, what does that mean? What's that talk? What is that really about? And it may surprise people that it's not necessarily about protecting our planet. We're actually the Planetary Protection Officer, and that office is responsible for protecting the environments we visit. So, for example, when we send rovers to other planets, to Mars, for example, we go to incredible lengths to ensure that they are absolutely. Sometimes, if you look at the any of the movies of people preparing those robotic spacecraft, you see everybody in these bunny suits, all suited up. A lot of that is not to protect the people; it's to protect the spacecraft from being contaminated, so we don't send microbes to another planet, or unwittingly contaminate or seed that planet with Earth, Earth life. So we go to a lot of trouble to ensure that we're taking the necessary precautions. And for a couple, obviously, because it's the responsible thing to do, because we want to be sure, we don't want to be sure we understand the long-term implications, but also because we're going there to look for life. And the worst thing we could do is having brought it with us, kind of contaminate the experiment. So we do make a tremendous amount of effort to ensure that we're very responsible in the way we approach other planets.
I'm glad you've taken those steps. But I guess life, like you said, will find a way, and it will kind of piggyback on the ride over to Mars, and we'll deal with it then. Well, David, I think it's Garen, ask about the Artemis program. We're going back there. It seems, as we all know, a lot of these decisions that were made programs are maybe political in nature. He asked, how can we ensure, I know at your level, Dr. Terrier, that these decisions are made in the best interest and they're not politically driven or don't delay the program?
That's a very great question. And of course, this is one of, frankly, in my job, and those of us at the leadership level, that's what takes a lot of our time, is to cultivate the support that we need from U.S. Congress and, of course, our allies around the world, our partners. I think we've actually shown with the International Space Station, as I mentioned, we've been with 15 partner countries, built the greatest engineering achievement humanity has ever built, and been now occupying and living and working together as an international community for 20 years. And the Artemis program is very much built on that model, where it's intended to be an international collaboration. In fact, we're even expanding with the Artemis Accords, expanding beyond the traditional partner set that we have on the International Space Station to many emerging space programs around the world, and including as many people, because this really is an exploration voyage to benefit humanity. And so, with that in mind, and with the potential for benefit to life on Earth, as I described before, all the technology, space requires us to push the limits of technology and science beyond what we thought was possible, because the challenge is so great, and that forces us to make the inventions, all the things that Apollo pushed, the miniaturized electronics and sensors and computing that we now take for granted because we're all walking around with cell phones, but we forget that those things would not have come into being, the internet, everything, GPS, if we hadn't pushed that envelope for space. So we're doing that again, and it will have that benefit. I think with that hindsight, the government, certainly in the United States and most of our partner countries, have seen that this is a very, very good investment, not just for those of us that are space geeks, but for the entire planet. And so I'm very happy to say we have enjoyed unwavering support in the United States from, completely apolitical, both parties, regardless of who is in power. We've continued to see very great support. The new administration, the Biden administration, has, come in fully in the Artemis program. And in fact, we've seen a substantial increase in the budget in several areas. So we feel very confident that we're on a very sustainable track that has long-term benefits for the United States and for all our partners. Frankly, cislunar space, the Earth and the Moon system, is the next frontier, and we and our partners, we need to ensure that we're leaders in that arena. And I think there's incredible opportunity for discovery in space, benefit on Earth, and frankly for economic opportunity, developing a whole I can see, entrepreneurs are popping up everywhere in the space business, developing a whole new space economy in cislunar space. So just a great time. And I'm very grateful that we've got such wonderful support from our leadership in Congress and the White House.
I think on that note, the kind of Artemis Accords, I think on the website is recently Brazil and many other countries, I think, are in discussion. I guess as you were mentioning about partnerships and expanding, and somebody coming from Thailand and other countries never regarded as having a full-fledged space program. How can they be involved? Like how does this work, and how do we all one day have most of the world together on the same program and going together?
I think that's certainly our goal, because as I said, certainly space and humanity's destiny in space is a global pursuit, right? I think the great news is that there are various sort of levels of entry, right? So for example, we have many fairly smaller countries and even smaller universities participating in our science missions, where they may, rather than building a whole spacecraft, of course we send out various calls for participation, and we have research teams from, as I said, sometimes fairly small countries, small universities, as well as the big names, who may build a specific instrument or a specific sensor. And so there's always a way, sort of an on-ramp to the program, in a small way, or whatever the country is able to contribute that is of value. We are happy to have those conversations.
Awesome. I will get in touch with you about that durian plantation.
Bring it on.
On that note, we've got Wagner Barrico Jr. Asking the most, I think you're getting this question all the time. UFOs opinion. Recent reports by Navy Pentagon. Thoughts?
Thoughts, yeah, that's always an exciting one. I get that from my relatives all the time. I usually tell them I can't talk to you about it. But seriously, it's this is one of the fascinating topics that, of course, the Pentagon and the Department of Defense recently issued their study findings, which were, I think, inconclusive would be the best way to say it. So from NASA's perspective, we have not seen any definitive evidence of alien life. Obviously, that is one of our top priorities as we explore, Mars and the planets in our solar system and beyond, is the search for life. And we have put a lot of effort into that. As I mentioned before, we've seen a lot of very encouraging data that says, hey, maybe we're zoning in on some areas where we think there's a high probability that we will one day be able to make that discovery. But to date, we haven't seen any. For our part, we're simply looking at, we also, our administrator recently mentioned that we were going to also participate in the government's effort to look at, some of these phenomena that have been reported, where it's not clear whether they are, some kind of new technology, terrestrial or otherwise. But as far, so far, no evidence to suggest that.
Awesome. Well, it's good to know that we're not waiting for any invasion like in the Avengers. So everybody, hang in there. We've got some time to figure things out and develop our technology. And Artemis Program will be a good response. Questions coming in as we kind of wrap up at the tail end, so keep sending them over. We've got Peter Baxter, and I think this one is really interesting for the Tech Summit. He's going to ask you, Dr. Terrier, the challenges that seem impossible. Is there some for NASA, or what's the mindset of folks there that anything is solvable and that you can conquer any problem with engineering and ingenuity?
That's a great question too. Certainly that is sort of, I would say that's the ethos. That's the in the DNA of NASA is making the impossible possible, right? That's what we do. Certainly people in the 60s thought it would be impossible to go to another planet, to go to the moon, to go to another heavenly body, and put humans there and return them safely. And it's important to note that with the technology at the time, it was very much impossible. That was actually true, and that's why we had to invent technology to enable us to do that, right? And that's the road we're on. It's things that are impossible today. We look at that as a challenge to overcome, and we've, as I said, put the brightest people from around the world working together, collaborating, and I think that's the best of the human spirit, is when necessity is the mother of invention, and space certainly makes some impossible things necessary in order to conquer space, and we see the return from that immediately, right? When we're faced with that challenge, we can find a solution. There are things that we're working on, advanced technologies in areas that would have been considered science fiction just a few years ago, whether it's quantum sciences, quantum communication, things like that. That really, even as I said, and when I was going to university, there were even textbooks would have ruled out as even being possible. So I hesitate to say that there are things that are impossible, and I think we're working at the very edge of what's possible, what's impossible, and trying to just move that boundary forward. And the cool thing is, there's always more out there to discover. So when my generation will do our part building on the Apollo team, the Apollo generation, and then we've got a whole bunch of smart young people that can take it from where we leave it.
So there's definitely nothing that is impossible. Even hyperdrive, light speed travel, technology-wise, you think we can do it?
We don't know how to do that at the moment, but our understanding of physics at the moment, of course, suggests that going faster than the speed of light would be impossible, to coin a phrase. But I like to remind people, and I speak to young people a lot, both inside NASA and in universities and so on. I like to remind them that the people who did the Apollo moon landing, the average age of those people, they were in their 20s. And a lot of the reason they were successful, and most people don't realize that, the average age was in the 20s. Most of those people were coming out of college with a fresh set of tools and ideas, and their biggest asset was they didn't know it was impossible. So they weren't daunted by the challenge. And I often tell people, our young people, when they're coming in, and I would tell young people around the world, it's good to learn from the past. They take those lessons seriously, and from what previous explorers and scientists have discovered. But sometimes it's good to act like you don't know what's impossible, and you might be surprised what you're able to achieve.
I totally agree. If I knew how hard it is to be an entrepreneur, I would not have started.
You would have started, right? Exactly.
So we were almost at the turn, and this is the last question. We've got Kevin, and I think great for the entrepreneurs, very important one, because private commercial space sector is growing, as you mentioned, trillions of dollars for cislunar and beyond. Is there any specific areas that you expect large growth, or where entrepreneurs and startup can really participate and make an impact, and that be able to collaborate with NASA for folks here at the Dublin Tech Summit?
Very good question, and one of the areas that I'm very excited about. I mentioned that NASA is in the business of moving the technology forward so we can go further with our robotic and our human explorations following behind that. But I also mentioned in my talk that we also want to create conditions in our wake, if you will, that are ripe for entrepreneurial and commercial success, right? And maybe an analogy would be, in the past century, in the 20th century, the work that was done by NACA, the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, and bodies around the world, largely government investments in aviation, were to push those boundaries in atmospheric flight. And today, aviation is a multi-trillion-dollar, completely successful venture, independent of government intervention. Right? That's the model I take into space. And as I mentioned, we're seeing success in that. In low Earth orbit, we are already now fully commercialized in our transportation of astronauts and cargo to the International Space Station. The Artemis program is specifically designed to take full advantage of international partnerships, as we just mentioned, as we talked about, but also to really draw on the entrepreneurial spirit of the private sector. Today, the space economy is valued at about $400 billion, roughly. We expect that cislunar economy to grow to trillions just within the next decade. And I think there's ample opportunity from everything from certainly space tourism. We're seeing several private ventures in that area. Obviously, the services providers for NASA. But for example, in the Artemis architecture, we are intentionally sourcing many of the key components from private sector companies and using that model that we did, that we were using on the International Space Station with private sector commercial crew and cargo, extending that into cislunar space and beyond. So I have many opportunities. And if I even go look further out, we don't intend to stop at the moon. The whole idea is to learn how to utilize the resources of the moon, to live and work there. But eventually, maybe that's an outpost for a port, if you will, for refueling and reprovisioning to go on to further destinations. And much of that, as you would see in any exploration adventure, whether it's discovering a new world or whatever, that will naturally flow into the commercial opportunities. So I think there's just tremendous opportunity out there.
Exactly. So that next outpost to Saturn, to Alpha Centauri, hopefully it's not the wrong planet to go. But I think entrepreneurs out there, the Dublin Tech Summit, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I hope you see that the impetus and the momentum is here for space tech and entrepreneurship. I hope also that all of us will get to meet in person when everything returns to normal, hopefully, in April 2022. And of course, I look to welcome myself to Dublin and have a great time with y'all in person. So thank you so much, Dr. Terrier. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.